Fox News alert, new fallout from the independent report on the Benghazi terror attack. The Associated Press is reporting that a State Department security chief and two others have resigned. It comes less than 24 hours after we first got our hands on the review, which offered new details about the events leading up to the September 11th of this year assault that killed our ambassador and three other Americans. Our chief intelligence correspondent, Catherine Herridge, is live on Capitol Hill with the breaking news. Catherine?
Well, thank you, Megan. Good afternoon. This is a scathing report. It concludes that there was no demonstration at the time of the attack on the consulate. Also, that al-Qaeda is not dead, that it has fragmented with its followers finding a new home in eastern Libya, and that there were systemic failures at senior levels of the State Department that led to grossly inadequate security.
I think the conclusion was very stark, very candid, very honest, and told us the following. Mistakes were made, lives were lost, and lessons need to be learned. First, America cannot retreat from a dangerous world. It is important for us to be there, to not only protecting our values, but protecting American citizens.
The report also cites the deteriorating security conditions on the ground in the months leading up to the attack. It cites 20 specific security-related events, including some attacks on the U.S. consulate itself. And despite these incidents, the State Department here in Washington continued to rely on a Libyan militia as well as an outside security contractor, both of which did not provide a meaningful defense on the day of the attack. As for Ambassador Stevens, the report seems to suggest that he bears some of the responsibility, saying that the U.S. Embassy in Tripoli should have been a stronger or more forceful advocate for additional security in Benghazi. And it also points out it was Ambassador Stevens' decision to go to Benghazi on the anniversary of 9/11. As for Secretary Clinton, she is not testifying this week. Her aides cite the orders of doctors who said she should remain home while she recovers from this concussion. But senior Republicans say that Clinton must testify before this is over.
I do think it's imperative for all concerned that she testify in an open session prior to any changing of the regime. I think that that's very important for her. I think it's very important for our country.
What's key here and what's missing from the report, Megan, is this important policy piece. Why was it that the Obama administration chose to pursue this lighter, small footprint on the ground in Benghazi when the intelligence and the security-related incidents before the attack clearly suggested that there was a rising threat and that security was diminishing? And the person who can answer that is the Secretary of State, Megan.
Absolutely. Catherine Herridge, thanks so much.
You're welcome.
Joining me now with more, Monica Crowley, who's a radio talk show host, and Kirsten Powers, who's a Daily Beast columnist. Both are Fox News contributors. Let's just pick it up where Catherine just left it off and so the big question that is left unanswered, which is why? Why was the security so inadequate? I mean, this independent review made very clear that whatever happened after the attack, what happened before was inexcusable. They were not adequately protected. The Libyan security force was a joke, basically cut and ran. And despite these pleas, our guys were ignored over there. And I'll tell you that Tom Rooney, Republican congressman from Florida, came on this broadcast not long ago, and he's on the Intel committee and said, I believe that they wanted it to look like we had everything secure over there, like we got it in order, we got it in line, we don't need Americans to protect the consulate, we can let the Libyans do it. And it was a visual thing, sort of a propaganda thing, for lack of a better term. And that's why we didn't have the security. Your thoughts on that, Monica? Sorry.
Well, it is an outstanding question. I mean, I took a look at this report, at least what's been made public so far, and it seems to raise more questions, Megan, as you just laid out, than answers. The critical question, as you just laid out before the September 11th attack, is why were these repeated requests for additional security denied? Part of the story we heard before today and before this report was that Hillary Clinton's State Department had asked for additional security because Ambassador Stevens and others in Libya were requesting that and were denied. Now we're hearing that no, it was actually Hillary Clinton's Deputy Assistant Secretary of State, Charlene Lamb, who has testified already before Congress, that repeatedly denied those requests. If that's true, then we have the question of whether or not those requests actually got to the Secretary of State. Did she know about it? Did she sign off on Assistant Secretary Lamb's denial of those requests? There are a lot of questions here leading up to the actual day of the attack, which then opens up a whole other series of questions that we still don't have answers to.
And the report did not seem critical of what happened after the attack in terms of the messaging, but it was very critical in what happened before that left Ambassador Stevens and the three others so exposed.
Right.
Before I get you to comment on this, Kirsten, and I'm looking forward to hearing your perspective, I just want to remind our viewers who this Charlene Lamb is. We at Fox News have not independently confirmed yet that she's stepped down, but the Associated Press is reporting that the Assistant Secretary of State for Diplomatic Security, Eric Boswell, and Charlene Lamb, who is his deputy assistant, have stepped down under pressure, in addition to a third person who worked in the Bureau of Near East Affairs. And so our viewers remember what Ms. Lamb said before Congress not long ago in the wake of this controversy. Remember this. Watch.
Ms. Lamb, yesterday you told us in testimony that you received from Mr. Nordstrom a recommendation but not a request for more security, and you admitted that, in fact, you had previously said that if he submitted a request, you would not support it. Is that correct?
Under the current conditions, yes. Sir, we had the correct number of assets in Benghazi at the time of 9/11 for what had been agreed upon.
It appears she's gone, Kirsten.
Yeah. Well, she should be gone, because the idea, I mean, I'm no security expert, but there really wasn't any security. So, you know, I don't think that we should expect a militia, essentially, to protect our ambassador. And you might remember that when Susan Rice went on the Sunday shows, she had claimed that there were two people there protecting the ambassador, when in fact those two people were not there to protect him. They were Navy SEALs, but they were in the country for a different reason. So I think it is appropriate that the people associated with this resign, and even, you know, in the report they claim they put some of the blame on the ambassador for not asking enough, but we know that he did ask quite clearly for more protection and expressed a lot of concerns, actually, about what was going on the ground. In terms of Hillary Clinton, you know, it's perfectly plausible to me that this did not reach her level. She's a Secretary of State. You know, I don't know that this kind of request would make it all the way up to her, but she should still testify and give her perspective on what happened.
And she can say that. I mean, she can say it was Boswell and Lamb, if that's in fact who it was, and now they've been asked to resign, and they have. Monica, one of the things that jumped out at me in the report was, although it found lapses in judgment and in management, no American official was found guilty of neglect or dereliction of duty. You know, how can you get to no one is guilty of any neglect in this situation?
It's incredible. It doesn't single out a single person for blame here, and it doesn't identify any disciplinary action to be taken either, which is equally as remarkable to me, Megan. Look, if everybody is responsible, as this report seems to say when it talks about systemic failures at the State Department, if everybody is responsible, then nobody is responsible. You know, remember Secretary Clinton at the beginning of this, when the scandal first started to unfold right after the attacks, she said, I take responsibility. And when she made that statement, she was actually directly referring to the lack of security leading up to the attacks. Yeah. Well, somebody needs to take responsibility here. I agree with Kirsten. She must be compelled to testify. And remember, you know, this was not a big mystery. This attack happened on September 11th, but also days after Muammar Gaddafi was killed by the Libyan forces in Libya. Within days, the al-Qaeda flag was flying over Benghazi, Megan. Yeah. So again, this could have been foreseen, and somebody needs to provide some answers.
I mean, the thing,
to
Kirsten, is that when you read the report, you remember, because you were on the air with us many times talking about this, and the Daily Beast did some great reporting on it as well. But you know, the initial story that was told was nothing like what is reflected in this report, and who knows whether we'd even have gotten this report if the press hadn't pushed for more answers.
The press, like, you mean Fox News? So no
and
other
Eli
media. Yeah, and Eli Lake, and you know, one reporter at CBS, I think. And Jake Tapper to a certain extent. But I mean, for the most part, the media has ignored this and acted like, you know, it's not a problem that things were said, such as there was Susan Rice said over and over there was this protest, which in this report they again confirmed for the umpteenth time never took place, and so people have just sort of lost interest in this. But in terms of nobody being held accountable, that's one of the problems when you have the government investigating the government. You know, this is basically the State Department investigating the State Department.
Right. We say it's independent. Technically,
yeah,
it is, but it's within the State Department.
Yeah. I mean, you know, but it's not. You need an outside, you know, force investigating. You cannot. Whenever. I mean, I have to always take it with a grain of salt. It's just when you have you know, an independent body investigating themselves. I would prefer, frankly, that it was Congress that was doing the investigation. Not that that's without problems, because that can be turned into partisan witch hunts, but it's too bad that we're never really going to have a real investigation and really get to the bottom of this.
Ladies, thank you both.
Pleasure. Thanks, Meg.
Thank you.